Whew. I'm sorry I'm running late. I had to do a quick dash to the store. You know what a dash is, right? In track and field, there's a 50-yard dash. Perhaps you've used a recipe that calls for a dash of salt. Perhaps you've heard the song that starts dashing through the snow. Yeah, that's Jingle Bells. Well, today I'm going to introduce you to an artist who became famous because of her dashes. And have I got a story for you. It all began in 1891 in Columbus, Georgia. A little girl was born to Mr. and Mrs. Thomas, and they named her Alma Woodsy Thomas. Columbus was predominantly an African American community. Alma's father was a successful business owner, and her mother was a seamstress. That means she sewed clothes for people. They lived in a beautiful Victorian home on the edge of town. Alma and her younger sisters loved to play outside, especially in the red clay soil, making teacups, plates, and other pottery. In 1906, when Alma Thomas was 15 years old, her parents decided to move away from Georgia for several reasons. First, some bad things were happening there. Racial tension and rioting began to happen in the streets of Atlanta, Georgia. White people began to argue and fight with African Americans. Alma's parents became very concerned. Secondly, Mr. and Mrs. Thomas knew education was very important. The local school only went up to 9th grade for African American children. Black children weren't allowed to go to the library or museums. Alma's parents didn't want their children hurt in any way, so they left Georgia and they went to Washington, D.C. There was still segregation in D.C., a separation of whites and blacks, but African American children had more opportunities for education there, and more jobs were available for African American adults. The Thomas family moved into this house. Mr. Thomas got a job at a church, and Mrs. Thomas made dresses for the fashionable ladies of D.C. Alma enrolled in Armstrong Technical High School. She was great at math and science. Because of this, she considered becoming an architect, but art had captured her attention, and by the time she graduated, she had taken every art class they offered. She said that when she entered the art room, it was like entering heaven. Alma Thomas decided that she wanted to be a teacher, and she began studying how to teach kindergartners. She moved to Delaware and began teaching kindergartners arts and crafts at the Thomas Garrett Settlement House. She loved encouraging her students to be creative, but she decided that she wanted to further her education. She worked there for 6 years before she decided that she wanted to go back to school herself. She moved back to D.C., back into her family's home, and attended Howard University. She studied and studied and studied, and she was the very first student to graduate with a fine arts degree from Howard University. Her professors encouraged her to paint full-time and to make a living at it, but she loved to teach. After graduation, she became the junior high art teacher at Shaw Junior High School in Washington, D.C. I tried to find some photographs of Miss Thomas with her students, but I couldn't find any. I wonder if her students and the administration never realized that one day she would become famous. Maybe your art teacher will become famous. You may want to get a picture with them. Anyway, Alma Thomas loved her students and she loved teaching art. She taught at the Shaw Junior High for 35 years. And when asked if she wanted to get married and have children of her own, she said there was not enough time between all of her teaching and taking art lessons and going to museums and galleries. She had no time for a family. She loved going to the museums and galleries because as a child in the South, she was not allowed to go to them because of her color. When she turned 70 years old, she decided to retire from teaching and begin really painting full time. By this time, she had developed arthritis. Some days she had a hard time moving her arms and legs. They were so painful. But did that stop her from painting? Absolutely not. Howard University heard about all the things she had accomplished with her students and with local galleries, how she had worked hard to advance the work of African American artists, and they asked if they could honor her by displaying some of her artwork. Basically, have a show exhibiting her art. She was thrilled, but didn't want to show her old artwork. She wanted to give them something new, something she had never done. They agreed, and she began to paint in earnest. She used nature as her inspiration. For example, one day she was looking at her window, and on the other side she could see the holly tree. As the wind would move, or at different times of the day, it showed different colors, different light, different movement. This inspired her. She quickly grabbed her watercolors and her crayons and began to sketch the different light patterns that she saw on the window pane. And this is how it all began. Sometimes her dashes of color would be scattered about with splashes of highlights throughout the canvas, like this painting of white roses. She felt like these roses were singing with color and happiness. Sometimes her dashes would seem to swirl on the canvas, like this painting of grass. Sometimes she could visualize what a field of irises, tulips, jonquils, and crocuses would look like from the eye of a bird. Straight rows of vibrant colored flowers. Not only did the fields grow vertically or up and down, sometimes those fields seemed horizontal or left to right. Oh, how I would like to walk through these fields of flowers. As I mentioned earlier, Alma also loved science and math. So in the 1960s, when the space program was at its height, she just had to paint what the rocket ships looked like as they blasted off, what the atmosphere might look like, the starry night with the astronauts, and of course, what the splashdown of the capsule looked like. She loved to paint with bright colors, the type of colors that only pure light could make, the colors that light, bouncing, dancing off objects could create. But her paintings weren't always of clusters of dashes or straight lines of dashes. She created circles of color, as if the wind was dancing through the spring flowers, little dashes perfectly painted around a circle or a dot. She would add cracks in the design, as if she were looking through a cracked window. If we look up close, we can see the white paint she added in jagged lines to make the cracked look. Hey, she made a circle with straight lines of dashes. Now that's cool. Alma loved her new type of art, and others did too. After the Howard University exhibit, other galleries wanted to display her art. The Whitney Museum of American Art in New York had a solo exhibit of her work. A solo exhibit didn't mean she had to sing a solo. It meant that only her work and no one else's was shown. That is a big deal. She was the first African American woman to ever have a solo exhibit there. Alma Thomas died in 1978 at the age of 86 years old. She was still living in the house her parents bought when they had first moved to Washington, D.C. when she was just 15 years old. Since her death, her reputation has continued to grow. Her paintings are hanging in museums and collections all over the United States. When Barack Obama was in office, his wife Michelle remodeled the dining room, and at the head of the table, she requested that one of Alma Thomas's paintings be hung. And in 2019, her painting called A Fantastic Sunset sold at auction for $2.6 million. Alma Woodsy Thomas once said,
"I've never bothered painting the ugly things in life. People struggling, having difficulty. You meet that when you go out, and then you have to come back and see the same thing hanging on the wall. No, I wanted something beautiful that you could sit down and look at. And then the paintings change you. All you have to do is put natural light on them. Light is the mother of color, and no place stays the same. I am a painter. I am an American. I've been here for at least 3 or 4 generations. When I was in the South, there was segregation. When I was in Washington, there was segregation. And New York, there was segregation. But I always thought the reason was ignorance. I thought myself superior and kept on going. Culture is sensitivity to beauty, and a cultured person is the highest stage of a human being. If everybody were cultured, we would have no wars or disturbance. There would be peace in the whole world.
I have loved studying Alma Thomas. She was such a great educator, a great artist, and a great American. I want to remind you to tune back in because we are going to do an activity full of dashes that's going to be so much fun. And I need you to remember to stay safe and stay healthy.